All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to ArtsLAB 2021. It's great to see so many awesome faces this morning. I wanted to start with some housekeeping really quick for those that would like live transcription, closed caption. Please, the bottom of your Zoom screen, you can click the live transcript button at the bottom of the Zoom window. If you select show subtitle, that'll get you live transcript throughout today's session. If you have any issues, we have my wonderful colleagues Amanda and Sophia are monitoring the chat if you need technical assistance there, but that should help you get set up with that. And again, my name is Nicholas Cohen. I'm Executive Director of Maryland Citizens for the Arts. And again, it's great to have you all here for today's session. As we always do, Maryland Citizens for the Arts believes in doing a land acknowledgement when we start each event that we do to center us and put us in a place of acknowledgement. So I'd like to take a moment to open today's event with a simple but humble statement of gratitude and acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that we hold space in Maryland across the traditional lands of the Piscataway people who have stewarded it throughout the generation. We all acknowledge that in order to make this a more meaningful practice, we ask you to consider learning more about the Piscataway Conoy tribe, the people where the rivers bend. Every community owes its existence and vitality to generations from around the world who contributed their energy to making the history that led to this moment. Some were brought here against their will. Some were drawn to leave their distant homes
land acknowledgement
of a better life, and some have lived on this land for more generations than can be counted. We acknowledge we are all standing on ancestral lands, and we honor the thousands of enslaved Africans whose lives were physically and spiritually stolen. We pay respects to their elders past and present. Maryland Citizens of the Arts humbly ask that we all continue our shared responsibility of understanding our roles in liberation, reconciliation, and decolonization of all our practices and work. Thank you. And for those, as we continue our journey of learning and understanding, we have provided a few more resources in the chat. And if you know and happen to know, we're obviously in a virtual space. So if you happen to know if I'm in Baltimore City right now, but if you know the ancestral land that you stand on, feel free to drop that in the chat. And of course, the references and resources we put in there, there's a site that can also inform you of where you are and inform your knowledge of that. So thank you all. I also would like to, events like today are important to put on, and we really appreciate our incredible sponsors for all events that we do and making it possible to offer it either at a low cost or free and scholarships available to anyone that needs it. So the William G. Baker Jr. Memorial Fund, they are the creators of the Baker Artist Portfolios and the sponsor of today's event. And of course, the Maryland State Arts Council, a big thank you to their sponsorship, but also to the work of the staff and the council to make our sector vibrant and equitable and investing in the art sector throughout Maryland. So thank you to all of the State Arts Council folks on the call and those not as well. So thank you for joining. We are active. We have social media accounts, and I always like to point those out. I know in a virtual space, it's a bit different, but feel free to share comments on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can always take a picture of your Zoom screen. I know it's not the most exciting, but definitely as you're going through the conversations today and what you're hearing, not everyone's on this call or Zoom meeting today, but we can definitely share what we're learning and follow each other on social media. And that said, we are recording today's session, just so you all know. So those that have their camera on, which is great, and we encourage that for those that feel comfortable, this is recorded. And so just know that, if your face is being shown, that it will be shown in a recording as well. Just a heads up. Wonderful. So today I'm really excited. We have some incredible leaders of the arts here in Maryland. And I think we're in for a really rich discussion today about sort of the state of where the arts are and what we're all doing and how we can all move forward in our work, in our practice, and even be more considerate and thoughtful and reflective in what we're doing. And so I would like to introduce our wonderful moderator, Denise Kumani-Gant. And Denise is the education director at Lyric Baltimore. And Denise is also the co-chair of Maryland Citizens for the Arts Events Committee. And this committee is made up of board members and community members, and it helps sort of align the staff and what we do and how we make events like this possible. So I personally are very grateful to Denise in many ways as a leader of the arts and arts education, and also giving up her time to advance our programming here at Maryland Citizens for the Arts. Denise is also the former artistic executive director of the Village of Arts and Humanities in Philadelphia, the former project director of theater for a new generation at Baltimore Center Stage. And Denise is also an accomplished playwright in her own, whose works have been read and performed at the Penumbra Theater in St. Paul, Minnesota, the New York's Drama League, and a contemporary theater in Seattle, Washington. So please welcome Denise. And Denise, I will hand it over to you to introduce our wonderful panelists.
Thanks so much, Nicholas. And good morning, everyone. It's so good to see you here for our discussion, which is going to be about the arts in Maryland and this new stage of the COVID-19 pandemic all of us are experiencing. MCA has gathered a really wonderful panel, and I'd like to introduce them to you now. We have Jackie Copeland. Jackie is the chair of the Maryland State Arts Council. She is an accomplished art historian and an experienced museum professional with 30 years in the field. She has served in senior leadership positions at the Walker Art Center in Minneapolis and in Maryland at the Walters Art Museum and the Reginald F. Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture. And she has served as the executive director of that organization. Jackie has also taught as an adjunct professor of art history at a variety of institutions, the most recent being Towson University. Jackie has received numerous honors, including the Best Museum Educator of the Mid-Atlantic region and Baltimore Sun's 25 Women to Watch. She sits on numerous boards and alliances, including the board of the Greater Baltimore Cultural Alliance. We're joined also by Krista Green. Krista D. Green is a professional administrator focusing on the intersection of culture and community development in the city of Baltimore. With 20 years of experience at cultural organizations, both small and large, her current affiliations include being the Chief Administrative Officer of the Peel Center, an institution that aims to illuminate authentic stories of Baltimore's people and places. She's also the director of Mount Clair Museum, an historic house and plantation site in Baltimore City. She's president of the board of directors for the Baltimore Heritage, Inc., the historic preservation organization in Baltimore City. And she is a trustee of the Awesome Foundation in Baltimore that provides supporting grassroots initiatives through micro grants. And finally, we're joined by Jessica Cleaver, who is Hartford County Cultural Arts Board Coordinator and County Arts Agency of Maryland Vice President. Jessica brings an extensive experience in information literacy, grant administration, and building and assessing inclusive systems. She enjoys problem solving and connecting people, resources, and organizations and ideas. So you're gonna hear some great things from all of them. And what I'd just like to do now is to set a bit of context, national context for our conversation, and also to let you know that we will be, we really want to hear your feedback and questions, so please make sure to put that information into the chat. And we have left some time after this conversation to make sure that we can address your questions. So here's some key metrics from Americans for the Arts, and this was just updated on November 16th about what is happening in the arts sector in the United States. Number one, they say that artist employment is recovering, but slower than the rest of the nation's economy. Arts jobs are still down by about 11% since pre-pandemic levels. And also, they state that arts attendance has rebounded probably, relatively significantly. 52% of people who stated that they were arts attendees have started attending in-person programs as of October, and they project that that will continue to increase an additional 19% by January. They also state that the pandemic's impact on nonprofit arts and cultural organizations and their audiences. As of July 2021, the financial loss to the nation's nonprofit arts and cultural organizations was estimated at $17.97 billion, a loss of about 557 million ticketed admissions. BIPOC organizations were more likely to report that they lacked the financial resources needed to return to in-person programming. And 70% of organizations were currently delivering virtual content or programming. Finally, the impact on artists and creative workers. Artists and creatives were and remain one of the most severely affected segments of the nation's workforce. At the height of the pandemic in 2020, 63% of experienced unemployment and 95% lost creative income. BIPOC artists had a higher rate of unemployment than white artists in 2020 due to the pandemic. And 37% of artists were unable to access or afford food at some point during the pandemic, and 58% did not visit a medical professional due to the inability to pay. So that's what's happening nationally. And now what I would like to do is to turn to our panelists and ask them some questions. So from your perspective, in terms of the state of our state, Maryland, how are the arts doing and how are you doing? And I would just like, let's start with anyone. I'm not going to call anyone who would like to jump in and answer that question.
I'll start. This is Jackie Copeland from the Maryland State Arts Council, because we represent a large organization that serves the state. We are here to advance the arts throughout the state of Maryland and to celebrate the arts in all regions of Maryland. And we are a major funder. When the pandemic, so I think everyone here, and thank you all for being here. I see a lot of us Maryland State Arts Council staff members. Kudos to them, kudos to the counselors, kudos to our partners. The council has been providing funding for a long time, many years. But the pandemic really changed the way we looked at our funding. We've always had emergency grants, but with the pandemic, we realized, we got feedback from artists and organizations. We realized that we had to change the way we were allocating our emergency grants. And we acknowledged, like what you said, Denise, many artists didn't have money to pay their rent or to get food and things. So last year during the pandemic, the Arts Council gave out $12 million in emergency grants. Over 1,000 of those went to artists and 512 to organizations. And it could be for anything. If you wanted to buy food, go ahead. If you were an organization, you wanted to keep the lights on or keep staff, do that. But we realized, listening to our constituents, how we had to change the rubric to provide emergency funding. So I'll stop at that and let my colleagues also speak. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jessica Cleaver, the coordinator of the Hartford County Cultural Arts Board, who was able, with some of those grant funds from the Maryland State Arts Council, to provide some of that emergency funding to some of our local arts organizations in Hartford County. And at this very start of the pandemic, we realized that we were in a unique position to help get money out to the independent artists who were not connected to our organizations. Kudos to the advisory board who acted quickly and made a decision to pull back restrictions on our arts organizations, mirroring the Maryland State Arts Council. They removed all of the match requirements for the grants that were already out in our community in March of 2020, and also made a commitment to our arts organizations that you don't have to worry. We're going to just renew your grant next year. So no need to fill out another application or worry, will we or will we not get a specific amount of funding. And I heard from our arts organizations that that was a relief. That was one big piece off of their plate of worry. And they were able to move on and deal with some of the more pressing matters. We were also able to connect to our artists. As I said, we hadn't really granted specifically to artists at the Hartford County Cultural Arts Board level, but recognizing that as the county arts agency, these were our people to take care of, and a lot of funding that was already out. We didn't have the Pandemic Unemployment Act for many months. I mean, gosh, over a year for some people before they were able to take advantage of it. And we saw that some of the emergency funding that we could get to our independent artists was one way that we could keep them going. Remember, we shut down. Everything was closed. We weren't even allowed to leave our homes. So being able to get that emergency funding out fast was, I believe, a great gift from the Maryland State Arts Council that we were able to then pass on, regift, regrant into the communities. But to transition to saying now, how are we? I mean, I think a lot of us are still feeling that pressure. I've heard from artists, while some of them feel like I've been creating the whole time and things are getting back to normal, others are still feeling scared and processing the losses of the pandemic, and our artists, of course, are able to communicate some of these feelings that everybody, the entire world needs to start processing, continue to process.
Great, thanks, Krista, and thanks, Jessica and Krista.
I was just, definitely everything that Jessica just said about the ongoing need. Not only was Peel as a local arts organization able to benefit from, state and federal grantors really responding to the pandemic and what that was doing to organizations financially by changing their guidelines, relaxing some reporting, understanding that people's programmatic year calendar had changed drastically. So we definitely were able to benefit from that. And then just relatively recently, we were able to regrant some small micro loans or micro grants, not loans, micro grants to artists in Baltimore County based folks. And so really seeing that need is still there, that our arts community, our artists and creatives working in Baltimore City still are looking for mechanisms to fund those basic needs that you were talking about, Denise, at the beginning, just being able to pay a medical bill, pay rent, pay, whatever. So we were really pleased to do that through the GRIT Fund and through the Andy Warhol Foundation as part of their regional regranting program.
Great. So I'm going to ask each of you to actually go a little bit deeper in this area. And if there are some individual stories that you can share about how either artists or other arts organizations are doing at this moment in the pandemic. And let's start with Jackie again.
Okay, I was trying to think of stories, but let me add to my other comment. When I talked about emergency funding, one of the things that we did, and I think I mentioned this, was that we removed barriers in the application process. And now the emergency grant application only has 2 questions. And we did this because it was just too complicated. So these COVID emergency grants have informed our emergency grants now, because we are hearing from artists that they still need help. So anyone who submits an application to the Maryland State Arts Council for emergency grants, it could be for COVID relief, but it can be for anything, any kind of emergency financial help. So I wanted to get that in there. So Denise, tell me again what you wanted me to respond to.
So if you would just talk a bit about any specific stories you've heard from individual artists or arts organizations about how they're doing, both from either from a place of financial health, or are they getting additional work, or how do they feel about the present opportunities that they have in terms of both making work and getting their work seen?
Well, we've heard from a number of organizations. In fact, the head of City Lit, who's on here, Carla Dupree, they have written to us and said that, the funding that we provided really allowed them to continue their work, and the simplification of the application process. We've heard from young audiences. We've heard from the Maryland Film Festival, the Bach Concert Series. And all of these organizations are really appreciative that we are responding to their needs and not just giving out money, but we're actually listening. And I think that is one of the lessons that this council and other agencies, hopefully around the nation, are doing, because we have to listen. We have to know where people are and what their needs are. And that's how we can get to equity, responding to their needs. So I don't have, I'm the chair of the council, and then we have counselors, but it is the staff who hear all of those stories and they share them with us. So I can't give you the detailed story, but I can say I know confidently that we are responding to the needs of the artists, and artists are, continually grateful for that.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jessica or Krista?
Yeah, I also,
Go ahead.
I don't have a specific story, but what I can say is, when we first opened our grant round, we did have we really wanted to make sure that the application, as Jackie said, was as simple as possible. But we also, we knew that there was still need, but we were also thinking, oh, this is later in the pandemic. Not necessarily are people going to apply, but are we going to see the same level of need that was perhaps 6 months ago, 9 months ago, 12 months ago? And though I don't have like particular stories, I can say just overwhelmingly the response as people were awarded the funds, or as they found out that the funds were there, was was extremely grateful and positive. I think that in general, this is a very particular time and moment that we're all working through. And I think Jackie was saying this, just generally, this is an opportunity for us to look at how we've been doing all of our processes up until this point, and how can we take some of the lessons that we've learned to get what we have out in a more equitable way. We've all kind of doubled down on that, particularly for the pandemic. We need to not let that understanding, knowledge, et cetera, go by the wayside just because there isn't a national health crisis going on. We need to be as fluid and nimble and responsive going forward after this is all, said and done.
Thank you. Jessica?
I was going to share that hearing from our arts organizations and also from the independent artists, a huge group of a huge variety of those parties were able to do a lot of learning, and with the help of the emergency grant funds, buy technology, microphones, cameras, lighting, and they were thrown into the fire, but we're able to come up with some really high tech and high quality ways to continue to make art. Our choir groups, one in particular, the Bay Country Gentlemen, who sing barbershop together on a weekly basis, and were largely made up of seniors, of course, the most vulnerable to spread. They, with the help of the emergency funding, were able to buy microphones and I can't think of the word, but something to transmit radio signals. And they came up with a way to sing together in their cars and hear each other, as be able to harmonize with each other. And then they were able to teach that teach those skills and share the actual equipment with some of the other choirs in the community, and then record themselves, hire, and now I'm starting to talk about some of the other choral groups, hire videographers and video producers to share their art in create something as a performance for people, not only the local audiences, but they were able to distribute their art much further than ever before. Our visual artists, at first were wondering, how am I really going to be able to create community and share, skills and techniques, but have had a huge success in having arts classes for children. The Harvard Grace Arts Collective does that on a weekly basis, and again have people participating from all over the country. And another artist who is a college professor was telling me how she really doubted that it would work, but she is really pleased with the community that she's been able to create and teach art online. Again, even buying art supplies and equipment, high computer equipment to do this. They were, all of those things, taking the classes were all made possible with our emergency funding. And, of course, those things get used up or become obsolete. So this is an ongoing need to continue this. So we know the pandemic isn't over.
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, thanks, Jessica. So, I mean, it's hard to believe that, you know, in March 2020, everything stopped. I mean, this was a moment when none of us knew how to use Zoom. Many of us had to quickly figure out how we were going to get programming to our constituents. I know in the case of my department, we moved really quickly to have online learning, and we made a choice that we would let our programs be available to all students in Maryland. And that ended up having a real benefit to us and having a benefit to the students, most importantly. So I'm going to conflate two questions. And for you audience members, I really would love for you to put your comments and thoughts in the chat, because we're going to move to you in a second. What lessons have you learned? Have your organizations learned? And we definitely have talked about the simplicity around applications and fundraising and how important that is to organizations. So what lessons have you learned, and what recommendations do you have for the field as we move forward? Because all of you have alluded to the fact that the pandemic is not over. And so what recommendations do you have, and what built, I guess, out of the lessons and learnings that you've gotten over the last 19 months?
Go ahead, Denise.
Okay, I think, you know, the Peel was in a really good position, if anyone could be in a really good position, when everybody needed to find a way to continue to interact with their, you know, audiences, but do it virtually. And I say that because the Peel had already started doing a number of programs virtually. The Peel has a virtual museum that exists in Second Life that people from all over the world visit. There's an exhibition that's up in the museum in Second Life. And so the idea that we would be doing programming and using platforms that didn't require physical engagement already was happening. And so in many ways, Peel has doubled down on that, and also has worked with other organizations to do some of their program virtually. So that was an opportunity that we had to collaborate further with some other local institutions and help them bring some of their programs online. I think that going forward, for us and for every other institution, the idea of no longer supporting virtual programming is, you know, you can forget about that. You always need to have a certain level of virtual programming, hybrid programming, rebroadcasting programming that maybe you've done in video, done in person, but then done videos of, and having that available for people. It's also about accessibility. I know that this program right now has live transcriptions. That's something that in the before you were doing something virtually, you may not have been thinking about the level of accessibility that your programs need to have. So it's not just transcriptions. You know, we Peel always works with live sign language interpreters for its programs that we will include not only, you know, in person, but also we have actually done one in-person event in the last 18 months. So that was great for the public. You know, we've had some exhibitions, but we actually had an actual exhibition opening with programs, and, you know, someone there doing live sign and doing some video. We need to think about the programs we do going forward in a hybrid way. I think all of us do, because people, it is accessibility in terms of making your program available to everyone, but it's also accessibility in that it's on demand, it's like, we've created an audience that wants to be able to view things in various ways, from their homes, from their phones, at a park, but from their phone. I think we need to lean into that.
Okay, thanks.
I'm going to add to what Krista said. For us, it's a little bit different. I think as a large organization that provides lots of grants, the lessons that we've learned are that the way we did things in the past are no longer the ways that we will do things in the present and the future. And I think every organization, every artist has probably learned that as well. So we have to resist the temptation of saying, when we return back to normal, because there is no returning to normal. This is a new normal. And we have to pivot and learn how to do things in a new way. For us, I think that we have been, the State Arts Council has been putting equity at the forefront of everything that we do. And we are now more than ever, and we've done this with a new grants for organization model that puts equity at the front. We've changed the model. But recognizing that small and mid-sized organizations serve our communities just as well, perhaps even better, than some of the large organizations in our state. And we need to acknowledge that, respond to their needs, and that we can serve the state of Maryland through collaboration between these small and mid-sized organizations and the large organizations, but recognizing that these smaller and mid-sized don't have the capacity for fundraising that the large organizations have. They're often led by people of color. So just recognizing that, and we, as the biggest agency, we can, as we work with our grantees, we can question, how are you serving your audiences? Who are your partners? And to continue to provide the leadership that we've built for this organization all along. So I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. And Jessica, you want to add anything?
The lessons learned, I'm sorry, is that our
Lessons learned, but most importantly, how do we move? How do you think we should move forward?
I will highlight the fact that we have recognized that a lot of the bigger systems in place outside of the arts, are not working for the arts. I saw Peter Dayton put in the chat something about the unemployment. That's something I've heard over and over again from our independent artists. People who work as independent contractors or gig workers, or have traditionally not been allowed to use the unemployment insurance. And the Pandemic Insurance Act that came in through, I think CARES brought that on board, or I don't remember what allowed that. It has expired, and once again, people who have those kinds of jobs don't have access to unemployment. That's something that we can advocate for on behalf of so much of the arts community. Even things like grants that are going to, from the American Rescue Fund at, not directly to the arts, but at, the local county government level or other institutions that were able to receive large funds to re-grant. They're not necessarily making nonprofits eligible, or if they are maybe not arts and cultural institutions. These are, some ideas that the arts are either a fringe benefit or not a vital part of the community that we all need. So I think we've learned that in a lot of ways the arts are left out of a lot of the systems. Okay, I don't have a nice way to wrap that up, but I hope that makes sense.
But absolutely. And I want to thank both you, Jessica, Krista, and Jackie. You raised a lot of important points. Before we go into our small groups, I just would like to query everyone who's in this meeting today, if there are any points you would like to make in the chat, or any questions that you have for our panelists. And you can put them in the chat, and then we'll take a brief break, and then we'll go into our small groups, and we can continue to discuss all of these issues. And I'm just reading through the chat to see if there are any questions or comments that people would like to raise.
I just want to jump in really quick, because the last piece that Jessica mentioned is obviously and put it in the chat. And I actually came out this week. I've been in conversations with my colleagues across the country, arts advocates. And one of the biggest things that came up is how we can think more broadly about support. And that means, sorry, my doorbell. That means we have to think beyond just like the small scope of art support, and like things like the PUA, the unemployment assistance we saw in the beginning of the pandemic, things like the PPP loan system going to nonprofits as well as for-profits. In the beginning, there were conversations about not including nonprofits in the PPP loan system, not expanding unemployment to freelance workers. But the arts early on in the pandemic found ways to connect with our colleagues in the nonprofit world, especially, to make sure that the arts were included. And so we have to think of more broad, so we change our messaging from just saying we're the arts to we're creative entrepreneurs, we're creative freelancers, we're the creative industry. Those kind of buzzwords, industry, entrepreneurship, resonates with folks sort of outside of our sector. And so my thing is, I think we have to start thinking about how do we change some of our vernacular when we speak with lawmakers, when we speak with even public-private partnerships, business leaders. We need to show that we're not just this ancillary part of our economy, of our human ecosystem, but we're absolutely vital. And it works. I mean, we've shown that it works, but now we have to figure out, I mean, Peter is absolutely right. How do we continue the PUA stuff? You know, if artists go on unemployment, or if they want to get unemployment, how can they do that? And I know that really is a federal issue, because it's too big for the state of Maryland, for instance, to take on that. I mean, we explored that with some leadership, and it just financially it would bankrupt the unemployment piece for the state very quickly. So it's actually a federal issue, and that of course takes time, but we've shown that it can be done. And I think, you know, MCA will take that up whenever we have meetings with legislatures, federal, state, and otherwise. We continue that conversation to hopefully change that over time.
I just want to give a shout out to Nicholas and the MCA, because we all know that the arts generate have a tremendous financial impact within our state, and continue to do so. And the Maryland State Arts Council is able to provide the funding that we need. You know, this year will be $16 million to organizations. We can do that because the legislature has been good to us. And Nicholas and his organization continue to work with the legislators to advocate for increased arts funding. So we hope that that will continue, even if you know, the election brings, you know, new people to the legislature, but that is essential for getting the message out. So thank you, Nicholas. And also, if any artists or organizations are on this call and you have any questions, contact the Maryland State Arts Council. The staff are willing to work with you on your grants, and feel free to do that. They're very helpful. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Jackie. So we are going to move to our small groups. Great. I'm loving the comments that I'm seeing in the chat, and would ask everyone to focus on those. And as we move into the chat, let's just think about recommendations, because we will be gathering all of this information and ways in which we will be moving into continued advocacy with the state, and looking at ways in which we can really make the needed changes that need to happen. So again, thank you so much, Jessica, Krista, and Jackie, for your quite salient points. And we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we will return to our small groups. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, wonderful. I'd like to take this time to once again thank everyone for being here. I want to ask our panelists and those who kind of facilitated the small group discussions to share a brief 30-second recap, kind of the main highlights, some of the main highlights that were shared in the group. I do want to let everybody know that this absolutely is confidential conversation, and while I will be shared
How was it?
from the meeting, names obviously will not. So I'm going to find Jessica, Denise, and Krista, and you all can start sharing.
Yeah, we were in the middle of a very vibrant conversation when the podcast started. So sorry to cut some people off with getting back into the main room.
Well, I can start. Our conversation was incredibly vibrant as well. Just so much got said. I think the big takeaways are there needs to be some coordination between a variety of entities around what resources are available to artists and arts organizations, and those in the creative field who are not working in a nonprofit frame, but that there just needs to be more information around that. There was also, at the beginning of our conversation, a lot of concern around both funding for fiscal 22 and fiscal 23 for arts organizations, and how, and people are taking a lot of deep breaths. So those are the two major takeaways in our group, but it was very robust.
Did you want me to go next? I don't know.
Yes, Krista,
Okay,
please.
so as we were about to leave, we had actually drifted into talking about the creative economy. But before that, our group also was talking a lot about collaboration and coordination. And one of our group participants summed up some things in the chat for us. That was Maura Dwyer. And she is coordinating Station North Arts and Entertainment District right now. But so I'm going to quote her. I think we heard some great recommendations: hosting annual events with higher ed staff in arts high schools, community engagement, student careers, hiring artists as community liaisons to do engagement, hiring or paying existing staff to do grant writing workshops in community centers, maybe with food, music, childcare, fun things that would go along with that. Continuing to create events that showcase results from project-based grants and maybe have some mentorship. like hire the artists that got the grants and then do some trainings for the next year. I think we definitely talked a lot about how MDVLA has a Mind Your Business program, and if there's an opportunity there to have a similar model for arts administrators and arts organization professionals, to just like you can spend time with an individual lawyer, is there an opportunity to have an artist book time to spend with a grants writer or another type of arts administrative professional that could really help them out with the administrative side of the arts, which a lot of times working artists aren't as familiar with. I think that summed it up. But yeah, we definitely started to drift into a creative economy conversation too.
We also spent kind of the end of our discussion was very focused on creative economy. I think trying to summarize, such wide-reaching topics in that conversation, my head's spinning trying to think of what I can highlight in 30 seconds. But I will say that I know people want to continue these conversations. They hope to be able to connect with other people on this call, find out more about what people are talking about. I think there are a lot of questions remain, about, how we can continue to adapt and grow.
Great. Well, I just wanted to say thank you to all of our incredible panelists. I think that the engagement, the talking was really, I think we got some really great things discussed. I was in Jessica's breakout group, and I agree. I think it was great to hear folks sort of talk through some things, and I wrote down some. I get, for me, I think we've been through a lot. We've heard that. I know the pandemic has been devastating for many, but I think there's sort of things that are coming up, new models, new programs, would be that, or just even how people are looking at artists and the creative workforce in a new way that I believe is going to turn towards a more equitable way for artists and arts admin to access funding and support. But that also means you have to continue these conversations and sort of push folks that maybe want to go back to what was done, or quote unquote, the normal way of doing things. We have to push and not allow that to happen. It's like that struggle of like that continual momentum, and we're Maryland Citizens are very committed to that. So I dropped my contact email in the chat. Feel free to email me about any comments, concerns, questions you have. I do want to also thank, so in addition to our wonderful speakers, Jessica, Krista, Jackie, of course, our incredible moderator, Denise. I work with some incredible folks here at Maryland Citizens for the Arts, and these kind of events go off as well as they do because we have great staff, and it's a joy to work with both Amanda Morrell, our program manager, and our newest addition, Sophia Cheatham. She's our new programs coordinator. And it's just wonderful to have both of them. And I thank both of them for watching the chat and being engaged and just making working at MCA so awesome. So I thank the incredible staff. It's been a joy. All of you on here, again, the advocacy is about sort of grassroots movement and us working together. So when we leave this space, we think about what we've talked about today. And I always think about every day, is there 1 or 2% of your time you can put towards advocacy, which means talking to someone about this work. And I will say we do have some creative edge. Thank you. Yeah, next steps. I was just going to say it. Where Amanda's going to drop a link to a survey in the chat. Big things that, what we end up doing is we synthesize a lot of what we're hearing from all of you, and then try and do things like when we put out our legislative asks, for funding, we try and incorporate some of the issues we're hearing. Of course, I always bring that back to lawmakers. We will have more even facilitations like this. I mean, I know people are probably looking around big thing on ARP, our American Rescue Plan funding monies, where that's going. So we're here for that. We want to be part of the conversation and also help you all know what's going on and what's available. So again, great to see all of you. That's all we have for today. And I hope you all have a great weekend. Oh, and don't forget Maryland Arts Day, February 17th. If you haven't been to it, it's our signature arts advocacy event. I knew there's one more thing. It's going to be virtual again this year because we're not quite sure what Annapolis is going to look like, but we hope you can join us. Again, another great way to be involved with your lawmakers and see even more wonderful faces. So hope to see you there. And again, we'll put out more information around that very soon. That is now all I have. So again, thank you all for attending. Great to see you all. Have a wonderful and fruitful weekend. Bye.